Howdy folks, this is Justro at Metcalf Mills. I want to tell you it sure is good to see you today. I want to give a special thank you to all of our subscribers that continues to watch our channel, and I just want you to know that me and the girls really appreciate you. I'm so excited to start this series today. It's not necessarily something I'm going to be doing my job, but I'm going to be documenting as much as I can, and I've tried to help with just explanations and things like that. But I'm excited to start this series, the King's Mill. We're going to be looking at this old historic gristmill. It's a little questionable about what year this thing was built. It could be all the way back to the 1830s, but you'll see as we go through it. We're going to go through from the ground all the way up to the roof, and I'm going to show you every piece of it that I can and explain everything I can. And I want to stress that these old mills, I see some videos here on YouTube that people do just like off the cuff, and they say a bunch of stuff that's not correct. And I'm not trying to sound like I'm a know-it-all, because there's a lot that I don't know. And I don't want to, in other words, I don't want to put something on here that's not as correct as it can be. And I don't ever want to tell y'all something that's not correct, even unintentionally. So I've really tried not to do that. A special thank you to my good buddy Mason. He's very knowledgeable in old mills, and he's helped me a lot to figure things out and understand things. So let's get to it. 1800s, here we come. I have a lot of good documented history on this mill. It'll be coming up towards the end of the video, so you can stay with us. Don't quit on us. And we make a little discovery that I have never ever seen in any old grist mill that I've been in, so that's pretty amazing. So in this room, over here on the end of the mill, this was the old pedestal where the big engine, I think it was a big diesel engine, was fastened down. And there was a belt that ran all the way to this main drive pulley. And that powered the main line shaft through the mill. This electric motor here, I forget how many horsepower he said it was, 40 or 50 or 60 or something. That run the hammer mill that is over behind it. And that motor, as best we can tell, was run off of a generator that ran off of this, I guess, this diesel engine and the main line shaft. I don't know if the generator ever run off the turbine in the creek or not, but we're pretty sure that it did run off of this main line shaft. So that electric motor was powered by a generator off of the line shaft. And down in this section is underneath the oldest part of the mill. What year? 17? 1830. This is the original part of the grist mill we're in now. And this, as far as we know, this right here was 1830. So that tells you how old it is. This is the main elevator bank for the flour milling part of the operation. All these spouts right here go up to receive product out of the roller mills upstairs. We'll go up and see them in just a little bit. All this brush you see laying here, the creek got up and washed all this in here. This was really dark, so I tried to edit it and make it a little brighter. It's a little grainy, but that won't last long. It's the hammer mill we're talking about up here. So this is the main line shaft. You can see it pretty good with the light on it. And that's what drove everything in this mill. this line shaft right here, these pulleys, is what ran the roller mills upstairs, right up on the next level. This pulley and belt come down to this big gear right here. This big gearbox. If you can see, this belt comes off of that up to this big pulley. This gearbox went from vertical to horizontal, which run over and belted to this pulley, this shaft to go up into the first bank of millstones, which were the French burr stones, which was for the wheat. So this is that gearbox, how that works. Another set of stones here was for the corn. The runner stone is gone. They think it may have was sold and went to Dollywood in the gristmill over there. So that's the best guess as to where it went and why it's missing. The adjustment for the French burr stones upstairs. Tenor adjustment comes down to this footstep bearing on the end of the shaft. Out here at the river, this is where the turbine was. You can still see the shaft, if you look closely, sticking up out of the water right there. We got lucky and the water was low one day. I was over there and I got to see a lot of the old gears and stuff that was in here. Right there you can see the top of the turbine sticking up out of the water. And getting this out, you will get to see that. We got in there with boats and waders, and we got all these parts and pieces out. I say I was sitting on a nice dry traco excavator doing that work, but them other fellers, they got all this stuff out, and you will see that. I've got most of it. Turbine should be on the end of that shaft. A gear on that come up to mesh with this bevel gear. Come inside. Drove this set of pulleys, which is the main drive for this operation. This is a cleaner right here that would have, we think, probably cleaned the corn. And it would have come down to this, after it went through the cleaner, it came down into this, there's a box right above here. I think where they would have poured the grain, the corn of the grain in, come down through this cleaner, down into this elevator, and it takes it back upstairs to go to the garner above the millstones. These elevators caught flour, maybe cornmeal, out of the stones and took it upstairs to be further processed. This was the cleaner for the wheat. Cleaner for the wheat right here. This would have been the first stage in cleaning the wheat. The next stage would be upstairs, going through the cockle reel, and then into the smudder that we saw. This is the garner that held the wheat. Had a sliding latch right here that they could work from upstairs to turn the flow of the grain on going into the cleaner here. So this just slid up and down like so. And that's how they cut the flow of grain off from that garner into this cleaner. After going through the cleaner, the grain would start its way into the elevators to go upstairs and go back down through the roller mills. Stairs here that go up to the next floor. the big box, I think, for the cornmeal right here. See it a little better. That's where it come out after it was milled. There's all the elevators up, how they look upstairs. There's an old barrel packer right here that would pack flour in a barrel or a sack, most likely a sack, but it's kind of how the barrel packers was made. So this table goes up and down, put the sack on, turn this big wheel, and it raises the table, the barrel, or the sack up. So as it fills up, there's an auger in here that's turning, it's packing the flour out into the bag. And this counterweight holds pressure so that as that bag or barrel is filling up, it moves down real slow and just packs it in as it goes down. So that's a neat old machine right there. Over here, you can see the banks of roller mills. There's 3 of them. It's a double operation, so six total sets of rollers in these 3 mills. This is the stones. This is the French burr stones on this side. The tenor adjustment to adjust how close together they are. This is a huge stone, probably just 18 inches thick. The bells and the screw and the crane is how they lifted these stones to take them apart to dress them. The elevators here that you could see from downstairs. It's not a lot of light today, so it's a little hard to see everything we want to, but now the roller mill process was steel rolls with different variances of grooves that were, some were more coarse and some were more fine as it went through the process, but they kind of ripped the grain apart and separated the endosperm from the bran. That was the purpose of these roller mills. This is a very neat roller mill right here. It had a governor regulator on the flow going in. We decided this was the first operation. Yeah, first operation. So I get this is in the science of milling wheat on a roller mill for fine flour. I guess it was real important to get an exact crack on that first time the wheat grains go into the roller mills here. So that's what this did. It regulated the flow of grain into the roller mill. Here you can see that's the rollers right there. It's kind of hard to see, but each bank of rollers, as it progressed down and as the product went down through the roller mill, back up through the elevators, separated out, and back down through the next roller mill, these progressed. The grooves on the rollers were finer and finer and finer all the way down to the fine flour. This is a mixer right here, a big mixer. So the product would go into this, and it had a shaft going through it, and it just turned, and they could put in their self-rising, whatever they needed, salt, their baking powder and all that to mix up their self-rising products. Over here was added on later. This is the feed milling side of the operation. You can see these big mixers here. And this was mainly what was used in the latter part of the operation of this mill. I guess we're ready to go upstairs. This big wooden bin right here is where the clean bolted cornmeal come down into. I guess they would scoop it out of here to bag it. Here's the stairs that go up. This long metal drum reel is called a cockle reel for removing cockle seeds from the clean wheat. We'll look at it later. Maybe a little more light up here, closer to the clouds. You can see right here, it's a long way down to the water. The bevel gear that you can see sticking out down here received the top gear of the turbine. The forebay would have been to the left of this. Let's see. So this is a wheat scour, which would remove any dirt, rust, anything like that that was on the outside of the wheat to get it good and clean for milling. The grain was fed in by this first elevator right here. Comes into the machine at the top and goes through the separation and the fan and all that. And the fine was exhausted through this square exhaust, just blowing outside over the creek. Right here is where the cornmeal bolter is set, and I'll show you a clip of that. This elevator right here comes up and caught the cornmeal from the native stones, is what we call them. And it come up and it come out of this spout right down into the bolter here, and it bolted the cornmeal, and it went out this outlet on the end down into the box to be sacked up downstairs. Has a diversion box here, which they could control, I guess, from downstairs, maybe. But it would either put the cornmeal coming out here or unbolted cornmeal coming out this side and going back down. Let's see here. This is the first elevator we looked at down in the basement. So this elevator would catch the corn when they brought it in and poured it into that box down on the floor we just came off of. It would go down, get caught and brought up, sent over into this garner box right here, which you can't really see much. But this would feed down into the hopper on the millstones for the corn side. And as we said, after it was milled, it would go down in the basement. This elevator would catch it, bring it up to be bolted out for good, clean cornmeal. The W.J. Savage Company in Knoxville, Tennessee was started by William J. Savage. He came into Canada and then down into the U.S. working as a millwright in the 1880s. And he moved to Knoxville, Tennessee, and he was a mill builder and a machinist before he started the W.J. Savage Company and started building mill equipment and supplies. Here you can see the W.J. Savage Company on the right-hand side of this picture. This machine is a scour. It would be process of the wheat coming into the mill to get cleaned. Controllable scour. It's in size double aught. And the wheat comes in up here via elevator. Goes through the first cleaning screen down into the scour, which uses centrifugal force to rub the grains of wheat against the screen, which cleans any and all foreign particles. Actually cleans the grain of wheat. It gives it a brushing, cleans it. It's the main drive line for up here. All the way across. Your elevators up there. Climb this old rickety ladder here. It's nailed on, so we're gonna try it. If I fall, I'll probably drop the camera. This is the elevators up here. First elevator from this side that brought the wheat up, put it into the scour here to be cleaned. After it went through this cleaning process, back downstairs to that other cleaner we seen, then into this elevator, brought it up, sent it down this spout, into this garner right here, which is just a big box over the French burr stones. And what they would do is they could run continuous, and they could keep this box pretty much full of wheat to be milled, and they could just use this store of grain to keep the hopper on the stones full, so there would never be a lapse in what they had to grind. After it goes through that, through the stones, then it would go down to another elevator and start through the process of getting bolted through this big eccentric bolter here. Barnard, Barnard and Lee Manufacturing Company, Moline, Illinois. Hangs on hickory rods. That's what provides the support for this machine. And I've heard of both birch and hickory for the wood for these. And they just go up to the ceiling to a bracket, and this whole machine would just shake. The way this thing worked. So you got this bank of elevators, each spout coming down comes from an elevator. And so in the flour milling process, it comes into the scour over here we just looked at, and it gets cleaned, and it goes down and into the first bank of roller mills. Comes after it goes through the roller mills, it comes back up into the first elevator, comes down to here, goes into here, and there's silks in here. This whole machine, it's got a big cam and a weight down under here. See it? And that big offset cam under here, it's hard to see. It causes this whole machine to shake. Eccentric motion. And as the flour comes in here, it sifts off, and the fine flour goes down into, I guess, a garner, a bin. And what does not go through the screen, or the silk, moves over into the next elevator, and it goes up and comes down into, I'm sorry, what does not go through the screen goes down into, back down into the roller mill to get ground again, and then the second bank of elevators comes up, and each roller mill has finer and finer grooves on the rolls, steel rollers. And as it moves through the process, it just keeps going up and down, finer and finer, taking the fine flour out each time. And it would just shake like crazy. And that's the purpose of these socks here. As the flour come from the roller mills down through, these socks would allow this machine to shake and keep everything flowing down into the screens. Same down here. And all these different spouts would go either to the next roller mill or down to the main elevator to go back up. And then get ready to go back through the bolter or dresser, which would clean the flour up. After it goes through the sifter, here you can see the top of the mixers, big electric motors here that drive them. This is a, I don't know if this would have been an old process. I feel like this flour sifter, it had silks. You can see right here it had fine silks here that sifted the flour. This is the old style sifter. I feel like that, I don't know really. I just don't know. A lot of these old mills, they had stuff added in at later times, and it makes it real confusing to know what was what. And I'm still learning. Seems like every old mill you go into, it's got a little something different and you learn something else. After it goes through the silks on this sifter, it falls down here and you got this auger flighting. It's made out of wood. It's a wooden shaft with wooden paddles, and as that thing turns, it's just like an auger. It keeps pushing the product to the opposite end. And the last process goes through this machine here. It's got, I'd say that's horse hair, horse tail hair. You can see the colors. I've seen a few videos of people just saying whatever they think, and it's all wrong most of the time, and I don't want to do that, so apologize if I tell you anything that's wrong, but like I said, this is just figure it out as you go. I talked to a friend of mine, Mason. He's very knowledgeable. He's a miller, retired. I call him a millwright because he has done a lot of work on mills and because he knows so much about all this stuff. But this machine is a brand duster that would clean, my understanding, clean the brand after it come out of the end of the bolter. So it's got brushes that sweep off the screen. That would be the very last process that it would go through. Not really the last process. It would go to the mixer after this, what flour was obtained from this process. This machine is the mixer. Don't worry if you missed that, I'll tell you again in just a second. But this is what allowed for mixing all the ingredients for self-rising products. And this would go down to that box downstairs or down to that big sacking machine that we looked at. This is a mixer. This is where they would put all their ingredients to make it self-rising. This is the discovery I was talking about. I've never ever seen anything like this. Evidently the conditions was just right. What year? 1950? 1953, fresh milled flour. 1953. So that flour right there is 71 years old. Is that right? Yep. 71-year-old flour there. Sitting here waiting on you. So you could open that door, put your self-rising product in here. As it's mixing, you got a slide gate right here. It won't slide, but that pulls out. You can let the flour build up in here while you're mixing. And after you get a batch mixed, then you pull this lever right here. It froze up, it's rusted, froze up, but that gate opens under the bottom, and as that machine's running, it feeds all that flour out. And then you can close that back, come over here, open this, and the flour that's built up in there will go down into the mixer. Open this door, add your ingredients to make a self-rising, and it mixes it up. See all the elevators here, bunch of them. They had to have a lot of them to make everything work in this operation. And the very old part of this, when it was built in the 1830s or 1830, there was these lips over here on the wall that you see right here. That was to keep the grain from going down inside the walls, because when they brought that grain up, they would spread it out on the floor up here to let it dry or whatever they needed to do with it. They even wet it sometimes if the moisture wasn't right. And there was bins right here that they would, you can see this spout right here coming off of this elevator. It would go over here. They would probably rake the grain around right here and spread it out so they could wet it down or let it dry to condition it for milling. I'm pretty sure that's how this was set up. That's the only way I can see that it would have been. But you can see these old beams over here, how they're hewed out with an axe. See the chop marks. You can see the notches where the old roof system was. They changed all that at some point. And this tube right here was another cleaning operation for the wheat. This is called a cockle reel. And the way it worked, these little dimples, cockle seeds were smaller than the wheat, and they were really hard to remove from the wheat. And they finally had to figure out a way to do it. But the way this works, the cockle seeds would go into the little indentions on this reel, and they would be picked up and dropped into a central trough down the center of this. They would fall off out of the dimples into that little central trough and then be separated out from the wheat. Hard to see, but there's a big... Thanks to my buddy Mason, he told me some more information about this that I was not familiar with. This being labeled a scour, most smutters, which remove smut from the wheat, had a vertical reel like this, but this is labeled a scour. So Mason said the smutter came before the scour, and these old mills, sometimes they just added equipment in later, so it's really hard to tell the timeline of a lot of stuff and what's what. So, but this is apparently a scour. It may be a smutter, and then it may be a scour on the other side of it. Because the machine is labeled scour, so I don't know if it was a hybrid or not a hybrid, but that's some new design or what. But anyway. You can see how neat this thing was built. I mean, it's just... And these spouts, all these spouts that come down here, this was a trade in itself, putting in the elevators and all the spouting for a flour mill like this. I mean, there's some pretty incredible woodwork and cuts to make all this work. You can see all these spouts and how it's done. I mean, it's amazing. But that was a trade in itself. Running all the spouting from the elevators. Access doors on here to get in there and check for make sure the belt's running and not stopped, and maybe clean it out, maybe join the belt together right here. You can see in the bottom of that, see that tin liner in there? Can you see that tin liner? It's been lined with tin. That allows a spout to flow better. If you have, I think it's like 38 degrees. If you're less than 38 degree angle, you need to tin line the spouts to make them work properly. So evidently they felt like these needed to be tin lined. It makes that flouring product slide a lot easier than it does on the wooden spouts. No belt in that elevator. I know there's one in here. You can see the cotton belt with the elevator cup. That's how they move the wheat and the flour up. These things were all running, carrying product all the time. They had this sight glass here so that they would be able to see that the elevators were running just at a glance. This machine could be for bleaching or for mixing in something in the final product. box. It was the flare. I think the flare come into this, the very last operation it went through, and this old latch right here is just what held that door open. But anyway, see these big old posts, how neat they had that chamfer on the corner. Look at that. Look how big these beams are. Them things are massive. What did we measure that? 10 by 16?
32 feet long.
32 feet long. I mean, that's just massive. All right. This is a big tank where they stored molasses to mix in with the feed. This is where the corn would come in from the bins outside, go over to this little roller mill to be cracked up. This was a big bagger right here. The big 50-pound feed sacks would run on this little conveyor out to the sewing machine right here where they'd be sewed up. Over in this end, the big hammer mill is down under us here. I'll try to get you a look at that. Right there's the big hammer mill. Big old motor that runs this thing. Blows the ground feed up through this pipe up into the collector above the mixers. There's the old delivery truck. Over in this section, there was a sawmill at one time, and the story goes that
The owner of the mill fell across the circle mill and cut him up.
the owner of the mill fell across the circle saw on the sawmill and it cut him up. And they said you could see where the blood splattered over there, right? So that's what happened over in that section. All that's long gone now. That's where the old sawmill was. But that's what happened. You can see the old roof line, how it would have been over the sawmill. I'll have more about this in just a minute when we get into the history of this mill. I guess that's about it, huh?
Yep.
Yeah. And outside here is where you can see the big bins that held all the grain. And over here was the scale house and the scales where they weighed the trucks coming in. The history that I have on this place mostly comes from the book Remembering Mills of Greene County. In this picture you can see the old original mill house that was originally built, and you can match it up with my current picture from the roof line and the windows. And it says, from Harry Roberts, the Harvey Carter Mill was the oldest in the area and was formerly owned by Wheat Williams. Williams Houston Wheat Williams moved to Greeneville after the Civil War and began extensive wheat dealing for the Kennesaw, Georgia mills. Thomas Williams owned land in District 7 in the 1850s. That land was transferred from Thomas Williams to Harvey Anderson Carter. The mill dam with its race and large overshot wheel was a picturesque part of the early scenery. The brother of the current owner, Lester Cooper, which is now deceased, supposedly traced the roots of the mill to the 1830s, but local oral historian Rhoda Kinney Carter, wife of Harvey Carter, never mentioned the mills in times before or after the war. The story, according to Professor T.E.R. Davis in Olden Times, goes that the old Wheat Williams mill, thought to have been built around 1865, got its name when David R. Ross, one of the millers, would bring his nephew, Ott Ross, to visit him. The mill customers began referring to it as going Ott's way in honor of the friendly youngster who was always helping them. The name stuck for the village post office as well. In the Greene County Census records, 1850 to 1940, the first mention of the Carters, Harvey and James, as millers was in 1900. The name Harvey Carter Mill was listed in Harry Roberts' book. It was used in the early days, but later was just called the Otway Mill and Otway Milling Company. The land for this mill may have been the property of William Dixon and Alexander Williams until the land was sold in 1866 and after. If the description of land sold from that property is correct, their land had a gristmill and a sawmill. Ladius's research could have been correct in saying that the mill was actually began in the 1830s. After Harvey's death in 1901, James H. Carter was the owner of the mill until it was sold to the Coopers. Levi Bayshore, 1868 to 1918, originally from Washington County and a family of millers. John Calvin Bayshore was his father, and who was married to Sue E. Osborne Bayshore, was the miller from 1900 until his death in 1918. August 22nd, 1918 part of the mill. That's what I was talking about earlier. Levi B. Bayshore instantly killed, fell across circular saw at mill near Otway this morning. A horrible accident occurred at the Carter Mill near Otway this morning about 10 o'clock. Particulars of the unfortunate affair have not been obtained, but in some unaccountable manner, Mr. Levi B. Bayshore fell across the large circular saw, and his body was cut into pieces. The news was telephoned to Mr. Walter Carter here about 10:30, and he left immediately for the scene of the accident. Mr. Carter tells us that Mr. Bayshore had been in his employ for some time, having charge of the flouring mill, also superintending the sawmill that was run in connection. He was a man about 40 years of age, a splendid citizen, and enjoyed a wide circle of friends. He is survived by his wife, Sue Osborne, and an adopted son. Levi B. Bayshore was born October 2nd, 1868 in Washington County, Tennessee. Son of John Calvin Miller and his wife are buried at Pleasant Valley Cemetery, Washington County, Tennessee. George Henry Reynolds operated the Otway Mill from 1930 until 1934. A Mr. Jones ran the mill for the Carters until 1942. In September of 1942, Charles H. Cooper bought the mill and moved his family to Otway from Sweetwater, where he had been a miller. He promised to build his wife a new house after the move. That promise was never fulfilled. When he moved, a sawmill was located on the creek side of the mill. Because of the death of a man in previous years, the Coopers took out the sawmill. At that time, the mill only used a turbine with a horizontal wheel and dam to power the grinding stones. The Coopers made and sold flour for Kitchen Queen. I'm pretty sure this is a misprint because Kitchen Queen would be the brand of the flour that they sold. Each mill had its own brand of flour usually. Lester Left ran the mill, and his brother Ladius ran the truck routes to sell flour into several counties in East Tennessee. The mill ground both wheat and corn until 1953, the year his daughter was born. When they stopped grinding wheat because of the lack of good product to grind, they eventually switched to only grinding feed. At this time, Otway Milling Company is the only mill in Greene County that still grinds corn and feed. So this would mean that this would be the last mill that ground feed in Greene County at that time, unless somebody has started one since. The book does confirm that Dollywood wanted to buy one of the stones, and you can see in this picture here that one of the stones is missing, the runner stone on the country native granite stones. So this must have been picture must have been took after they got it. Miss Linda, who is the daughter of Mr. Cooper, recalls a time when she was younger and the area's young people used to play in the creek at night and make a lot of noise, and her family couldn't sleep. And she said her daddy would go to the basement of the mill, rattle some old chains, and moan, and the young people would remember the blood splattered on the wall of the mill and the man that died, and they would think they was hearing ghosts, and they would run away so the family could get some sleep and peace and quiet. This picture shows Jerry Lawson pouring molasses into a run of livestock feed. Bob Hurley relates that event to the saying, slower than molasses in January. Mr. Lawson said it doesn't take all day, it just seems like it. Mr. Cooper, who has worked at the mill for 70 years, would like to get a grant to restore the mill because at that time all the equipment was still in the mill and in working condition. The school day had just gotten underway on a morning in 1939 when a knock came at the classroom door and a message came from the principal. I had just started in the first grade, and I knew that Principal Glendon C. Brown sent only important messages. In fact, Mr. Brown often dropped by the classroom himself. The message was there would be a student body assembly after the morning recess. The high school was on the second floor and the elementary on the first floor. The assemblies were held in the gym next door. We wondered what the meeting would be about. It turned out that the principal had gotten word. Principal Brown had a way of knowing most everything, we believed, that some boys had the habit of leaving school for a while to walk over to the Otway Mill just next door, going down under the mill by the water wheel to play poker. One morning, hearing the boys were under the mill, Mr. Brown went home, put on overalls, sunglasses, and an old hat, and joined them. He asked if they would let him play. Not recognizing him and guessing an adult might have a nickel to play, they dealt him a hand, whereupon he took off his hat and glasses and said, "Now we need to finish this game at school." When the time came for the assembly, Mr. Brown had all the boys who had been at the mill, boys who had no experience of standing before the school to say anything, apologize by saying, "I am sorry for playing cards under the mill and missing school. I often went to the mill with my father and brothers to get our corn ground, but I never went under the mill except to watch the wheel." Story by Lyle Ray Smith, Fredericksburg, Virginia, who became a principal himself with many of the qualities of Glendon C. Brown. When George Henry Reynolds, the father of Buford, was running the mill in the early 1930s, he took out an ad in the Otway High School newspaper that was published monthly. This one came from 1931. Thanks to Miss Linda, who'd rather see her family history preserved than to waste away, and thanks to Jason Cobble for an amazing amount of work and commitment, this mill will live to mill again. And a big old thank you to Miss Brandy for all the good food. I'm looking forward to sharing the reconstruction of this historic grist mill with you right here on YouTube.